She was the adopted black daughter in a rich white family, silent, polite, invisible. But at her sister's perfect wedding, Nina Caldwell overheard the unthinkable. She had only ever been a diversity prop. What followed shattered a carefully constructed illusion and exposed a betrayal that stunned an entire ballroom. This isn't just a story about racism or class. It's about reclaiming worth, speaking truth, and walking away with power. Who really belongs in a family built on image over love? Where are you watching from? Drop your city below and subscribe now to hear more stories that move, shock, and inspire. The road twisted like a silver ribbon through the hills as Nina Caldwell's car hummed steadily forward, her hands locked at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Her pulse was a quiet thunder beneath her skin. The Lancaster estate rose like a vision from a dream or a nightmare. At the end of the drive, all stone terraces, manicured lawns, and glinting fountains. It was the kind of place meant to impress, to intimidate, and it succeeded effortlessly. As the wrought iron gates opened, she inhaled deeply, schooling her face into composure. It didn't matter that her stomach twisted itself into knots. Today wasn't about comfort, it was about survival. She had spent days choosing the right dress, something elegant but not ostentatious, something that would blend in. The soft green silk clung to her in quiet confidence, a color that felt like dignity, not defiance. Her hair was styled into a sleek bun, with every coil tamed just enough to avoid scrutiny, but still wholly her own. The pearl studs in her ears had belonged to her biological mother, a silent tether to something real in a place that often felt like a performance. As she pulled up to the valet circle, a young man in a crisp black suit approached. His smile wavered, just slightly, when his eyes met hers. It was a flicker, barely a moment, but she caught it. She always did. Nina stepped out, her heels clicking against the cobblestone, and offered him a soft thank you. The air was heavy with the scent of roses and wealth. She adjusted her clutch and made her way past murmuring clusters of guests, all dressed in pastels and laughter. No one greeted her. Inside, the grand hall shimmered under massive chandeliers, the air thick with celebration. Every detail was immaculate. Gold-rimmed plates, linen napkins folded like origami, towering white floral centerpieces. Nina had been to events like this before, of course. Her parents, Helen and Marcus Caldwell, had made sure she was well-versed in the language of high society. But being present had never meant being included. At the check-in table, a young woman with a headset and clipboard smiled brightly, then froze as Nina stepped forward. "Name, please?" "Nina Caldwell," she said evenly. The woman scanned the seating chart, fingers moving a little too quickly. There it was again, confusion, discomfort, then the polite smile. "You're near the service doors," she chirped, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Nina blinked. "I'm sorry, the kitchen?" "It's just outside the main hall," the woman said, already marking her spot. "Lovely view of the garden." Nina didn't respond. She took the place card handed to her and turned toward the hall. Her parents were already inside, seated near the front beside the bridal party. Chloe, her older sister, glowed at the center of it all in a dress of white lace and pearl. Nina watched them for a moment, a tableau of perfect family harmony, except for the quiet omission of her presence from the frame. As she approached, her mother was fussing with Chloe's veil, smoothing it with gentle fingers. Marcus chuckled beside them, sharing a joke with one of the groomsmen. Nina cleared her throat. "Mom?" Helen didn't look up. "Nina, now's not the time." "Just a second," Nina insisted. "They seated me by the kitchen." Helen finally turned, her expression composed but impatient. "We had to prioritize close family." "I am close family." "Don't be dramatic," Helen said with a smile so sharp it cut. "It's just a seat." Chloe looked over then, her expression unreadable. "Don't take it personally, Nini. Weddings are crazy." Nina nodded slowly, a storm brewing just behind her ribs. She said nothing more. She didn't need to. The message had already been delivered. She wasn't here to be celebrated. She was here to be tolerated. And even that felt conditional. The music inside the hall swelled, a polished quartet playing some forgettable waltz, and Nina moved like smoke along the edge of it all. She kept her back straight, her steps deliberate, her eyes scanning for a place where she wouldn't feel so visibly misplaced. The sea of pale silk dresses and dark suits seemed to shift unconsciously away from her, not cruelly, not overtly, just enough to remind her she didn't belong. Not really. She slipped through a side archway and found an alcove near the bar, partially hidden by a marble column. Here the world felt quieter, the lights less blinding. A waiter passed by and paused. "Champagne, miss?" She nodded. "Yes, please." He handed her a glass with a warm smile. "You look elegant, Miss Caldwell." The words caught her off guard. Not the compliment, but the way he said her name without hesitation or calculation. She gave a soft, "Thank you," and took a sip. The bubbles fizzed sharp at the back of her throat. She held on to the moment like a lifeline. As she stood there watching Chloe twirl beneath the chandeliers, memories flickered like old film behind her eyes. The first time she met Helen, she had been 7. Nervous. Braided hair too tight, tiny fingers clutching a tattered stuffed rabbit. Helen had knelt down and smiled, brushing invisible lint from Nina's collar. "We'll take good care of you," she'd said. Nina had believed her. There were good moments. Birthdays with neatly wrapped gifts, winter mornings with cocoa by the fire, but they were always framed like photo ops. Nina remembered one Christmas, when family portraits were taken in matching sweaters. The photographer had placed her at the end of the couch, smiling through clenched teeth, while Chloe sat in the center, nestled between their parents like royalty. Nina's smile hadn't reached her eyes. She let out a long breath and shook the memory away. "Focus, Nina. You're not that girl anymore." A burst of laughter pulled her attention toward a slightly ajar service door behind the bar. The warm spill of light and the clinking of glasses told her someone was back there. Staff, maybe? Or guests who had wandered away. She wasn't sure why she moved closer. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that bone-deep instinct of knowing when people are talking about you. She leaned gently toward the opening, careful not to make a sound. "I swear," came Chloe's voice, light and full of mockery, "if I see Nina's face in one more family photo, I might scream." Another voice, female, shrill with laughter, answered, "Seriously, Chloe. Your mom's like a saint for even keeping her around. Most people would have let that charity case go after the adoption credits cleared." Chloe snorted. "Please. It wasn't about kindness. It was optics. Dad's company was getting roasted for their board diversity back then. Taking in a little black girl made them look like saviors." The laughter that followed was sharp, glassy. It cut deeper than any slap. Nina's breath caught in her chest. She gripped the edge of the wall to steady herself, fingers digging into the cool plaster. "And let's be honest," Chloe added, "she never really fit. Never will. This whole wedding's being photographed for style and grace, and I had to make sure she wasn't lurking in the background like some awkward shadow." Another voice chimed in. "She should be grateful you even invited her." "She'll stay in the background," Chloe said casually, "where she belongs." Nina stepped back, carefully, the floor shifting under her feet. Her ears rang, not from volume, but from the sheer violence of being seen so clearly and dismissed so cruelly. She turned, intending to disappear before anyone noticed her, and froze. Just feet away, at the edge of the hallway, stood Ryan Lancaster, the groom, Chloe's fiancé. He had heard everything. For a long moment, Nina and Ryan stood frozen in the half-lit hallway, the words from Chloe's mouth still hanging thick in the air behind them. He looked as if he'd been struck, his jaw tight, eyes wide, champagne flute trembling in his hand. Nina's heart pounded with a dull, relentless rhythm, her instincts screaming to vanish into the shadows. But she didn't move. She couldn't. Not this time. Their eyes met. Ryan's expression shifted, softened. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Just a breath, ragged and stunned. Then he looked past her toward the slightly open door where the laughter was still echoing, oblivious, vicious. "I had no idea," he said finally, voice low and hoarse. "I know," Nina replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. Another silence fell, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy, crackling with something unspoken. Ryan stepped forward, slipping his phone into his jacket pocket, his composure slowly returning. Not the polished charm he had worn all evening, but something realer, rougher. "We need to talk," he said, "but not here." Before Nina could respond, a tall figure approached from the far end of the corridor, her heels tapping with unhurried grace. Margot Lancaster, Ryan's mother, appeared like a ghost conjured from a different world. Draped in a midnight blue gown, her silver hair swept into a flawless chignon, she carried herself with the kind of presence that turned rooms silent. Her eyes, sharp and unreadable, flicked between Ryan and Nina. Something's happened, she said calmly, though her tone allowed no room for pretense. I can feel it. Ryan gave a curt nod. You'll want to hear this. They moved quickly but quietly, away from the service hallway and into a small, seldom-used sitting room on the second floor. Nina had never been in this part of the estate before. The walls were lined with oil paintings, men in powdered wigs, women with haunted eyes, and the windows looked out over the rear gardens. It was quiet here, removed, honest. Ryan relayed everything, the words, the laughter, the cruelty. He spoke plainly, with a conviction that stunned Nina. She sat still, hands clasped tightly in her lap, unsure whether to feel vindicated or violated. When he finished, Margot's expression didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her clutch and pulled out her own phone. I suspected something, she murmured. Not this, but something. Her fingers moved swiftly across the screen. There's more. A friend in publishing forwarded me messages, emails from Chloe to a PR advisor. About the marriage, about strategy. She handed the phone to Ryan. His eyes scanned the screen, face draining of color. She was planning to divorce me, he said flatly. After securing the inheritance clause, she called it a short-term brand partnership. He let out a laugh that held no humor, only disbelief. Margot remained still, but something in her gaze darkened. This cannot stand. No, Ryan said, it won't. Then slowly he turned to Nina. I need your help, not for revenge, but for truth. Nina hesitated. She'd spent years swallowing truth for the sake of peace, for belonging. But tonight, something inside her had cracked open, and there was power in that fracture. She nodded. Margot laid out the plan, a private confrontation upstairs before the toasts. No scene, no spectacle, just the truth, delivered clearly, with no room for denial. Ryan would ask Chloe and both sets of parents to join them in a private room. Margot would back him with authority that no one dared question. And Nina would be there, not as an accuser, but as a witness. As herself. As they finalized the details, Nina felt her pulse steady for the first time all night. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was choosing. The lights in the grand ballroom glittered like stars frozen in crystal, casting golden halos on the polished floor as laughter rippled across the room. Guests twirled in elegant choreographies, champagne glasses clinked, and smiles bloomed like manicured flowers. Perfect, rehearsed, unshakable. Nina stood near a marble column, half hidden, her heart pacing beneath the soft green folds of her dress. She was waiting, not for permission, not for acceptance, for the moment the truth would step into the light. Ryan moved first. He crossed the dance floor with careful confidence, his dark suit sharp against the glow of white roses and candlelight. Chloe beamed as he approached, mistaking the gravity in his eyes for adoration. She reached for him. He didn't take her hand. Can I steal you for a moment? He asked gently, his voice low enough for her ears alone. She blinked, the smile faltering for just a fraction of a second. Of course. He turned, and she followed, signaling for Helen and Marcus to come with her. They obeyed, Helen casting a quick glance back at her circle of admirers. Lips tightening as if summoned from a throne. Margot waited near the base of the stairs, her expression unreadable. Nina joined her, and together they climbed the winding steps, silent except for the soft rustle of satin and the echo of heels against wood. Upstairs, the reception room was dimly lit and heavy with age. Mahogany-paneled walls enclosed the space, and portraits of ancestors looked down with bored indifference. A long table stood at the center, flanked by high-backed chairs that felt more like judgment seats than resting places. Ryan stood at the head, his fingers brushing the edge of the table as he steadied himself. Chloe sat first, smoothing her gown, offering him a radiant, confused smile. Helen and Marcus took the chairs beside her, their expressions polite masks stretched tight. Margot remained standing near the door, arms crossed, eyes unblinking. Nina took her place beside the window, the city lights glimmering behind her like distant stars. I want to thank you for joining me, Ryan began, voice measured, calm. This isn't how I imagined tonight unfolding, but I believe we all deserve truth, even when it's difficult. Chloe's smile stiffened. Ryan, what's going on? He reached into his jacket and placed a white envelope on the table. These are annulment papers, he said plainly. Signed, effective immediately. Helen gasped, a sharp sound swallowed by her manicured fingers. Marcus shifted in his seat, mouth tightening. Chloe let out a laugh, bright, brittle. "You're joking," she said, voice trembling around the edges. "No," Margot said coolly from the door. "He's not." Ryan pulled out his phone, thumbed through his screen, and began to read aloud. "6 months after the wedding, once the transfer goes through, I'll be set. Play the sweet wife. Smile at the cameras. Let him think he chose me." Chloe's face drained of color. Her hands gripped the arms of the chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "There's more," Ryan continued, his voice steady. "I'm not waiting around for a man who still asks his mother for advice. He's a stepping stone, nothing more." Helen sobbed softly. Marcus stared ahead, face red, unmoving. Nina watched in silence. The storm had broken. She had expected to feel satisfaction, but all she felt was a quiet ache, a mourning for something that had never been real. Chloe surged to her feet, eyes wild. "This is insane," she cried. "You're ruining everything." "No," Ryan said, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "You did that all on your own." Then he turned and walked toward the door, every step a declaration. Margot followed, her hand grazing his arm in passing. Nina lingered just a moment longer. Chloe looked at her then, eyes full of rage and desperation. But Nina said nothing. She didn't need to. The truth was already louder than anything she could say. She turned, heels silent against the floor, and left the ruins behind her. The grand hall was a mosaic of fractured illusions. Nina stood just beyond the marble archway, watching from the shadows as the remnants of a celebration unraveled in silence. Guests shifted in awkward clusters, their polished smiles giving way to hushed murmurs and darting glances. The music had stopped. The light still gleamed, but the warmth was gone, replaced by something brittle, something cold. She saw Chloe reappear before anyone else did. The doors at the far end of the hall creaked open, and there she stood, framed by the night behind her. The once perfect bride was unrecognizable now, her lace gown torn at the hem, her veil slipping from its pins, and mascara running down her cheeks like bruises. For a breathless moment, the room froze. Then, one by one, heads began to turn. Chloe walked in slowly, her heels uneven against the polished floor. She scanned the crowd with wide, feverish eyes, searching for sympathy and finding only distance. Her friends avoided her gaze. Even Helen and Marcus stood rooted in place, their faces pale, hands clasped as if holding something fragile and invisible between them. "You think you can humiliate me like this?" Chloe shrieked suddenly, the sound cracking through the hall like a whip. "After everything I've done for this family, for this night?" No one answered. She turned toward the guests, arms flung wide. "I built this. Every flower, every table, every dress. You're all here because of me." Her voice echoed, bouncing off the chandeliers. Still silence. Her eyes landed on Ryan, standing near the dais, calm and unmoving. At his side was Margot, regal and silent as a stone sentinel. "I loved you," Chloe cried, stumbling toward him. "I did everything for us." Ryan didn't flinch, he didn't speak. He only looked at her, and that, more than anything, made her falter. "You did everything for yourself," Margot said, her voice razor-sharp despite its softness. "And now you're standing in the world you built." Chloe recoiled as if struck. Her gaze darted wildly until it found Nina, still near the column, watching. And that was when it broke. "You," Chloe hissed, pointing a shaking finger. "This is your fault. You've always been jealous of me, always trying to destroy what I had. You wanted this." Heads turned, whispers rose, but Nina did not move. She stood steady, calm, her voice clear as crystal. "I never wanted what you had," she said. "I just wanted to be seen." The words fell into the silence like a stone into still water, rippling through the crowd. Chloe's mouth opened, then closed. Her arms dropped to her sides. For a beat, no one moved. Then Chloe let out a guttural sob, turned and fled through the doors again, vanishing into the night like a ghost too furious to rest. The guests stood in stunned silence. Slowly the spell lifted. Quiet conversations resumed, muted, uncertain. Some began to gather their things, exchanging looks that said more than words ever could. Nina stood alone in the center of it all, surrounded by the glittering ruins of the night. She didn't feel triumphant. There was no vindication, no swelling music of justice served, just stillness. Just breath. Just the slow realization that something had ended and something else had quietly begun. She stepped outside into the cool, quiet night. The stars overhead shimmered, indifferent and eternal. The air was sharp and clean, untouched by champagne or perfume or pretense. For the first time in a long time, Nina felt weightless. The estate loomed behind her, all stone and glass and shadows. But it no longer held her, not her worth, not her voice, not her story. She walked to her car, slid behind the wheel, and started the engine. The road stretched ahead in silver ribbons, winding toward the unknown. And this time, she didn't look back. Some truths are too quiet to be heard over the noise of celebration, until they rise undeniable and loud in the silence that follows a fall. Nina's story is not just about betrayal, it's about awakening. For years she believed that if she smiled enough, worked hard enough, stayed quiet long enough, she would eventually earn her place. But tonight she discovered a deeper truth. You cannot negotiate belonging with people who benefit from your invisibility. Respect should never be conditional. Family should never be performative. And love, real love, is not something you beg for. It sees you fully, hears you fully, and welcomes you not as a symbol, but as a soul. Nina didn't burn bridges. She simply walked away from a world that was never built for her into one she could finally claim for herself. That's the heart of the lesson. We don't have to shrink ourselves to fit into places that were never meant to hold us. We are allowed to choose ourselves. Loudly, unapologetically. So, wherever you are, whatever you've walked through, remember this. The freedom to walk away from what diminishes you is a power all its own. And sometimes the most powerful story you can write is the one where you stop waiting for acceptance and start accepting yourself. Let us know, where in the world are you watching from? And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful narratives like this one. Your voice matters here. Your story matters. Welcome to the community.